The message was 8 words. She typed them one letter at a time because her hands would not stop shaking, because the right side of her face had gone numb somewhere between the kitchen floor and the back door she'd managed to reach before his fingers closed around her arm a second time, and because the phone screen kept blurring in and out of focus in a way she was fairly certain meant something was very wrong with the world, or with her, or with both. He broke my jaw. I can't go home. Please, can you come? She added the address of the pharmacy where she worked the overnight shift. The building on Carmine and 5th, she typed. Back entrance, the one with the broken light. She didn't add a name because she didn't need to. Daniela would know. So Daniela had been knowing things about Camille's life that Camille never said out loud for going on 12 years, since the 7th grade, when they'd sat next to each other in earth science and discovered they both hated group projects and loved the same terrible vampire novels. Daniela would look at her phone, and she would come. That was simply what Daniela did. Camille hit send. She did not look at the screen after that. She let the phone slip from her fingers onto the cold tile floor of the employee restroom, pressed her back against the wall beneath the paper towel dispenser, and breathed through her mouth because breathing through her nose was no longer something her body would allow. The right side of her face felt enormous, hot, and tight all at once, like something inside it was pressing outward against the skin, so that the left side felt like nothing at all. She pressed 2 fingers gently to her jaw, and the pain that spiked through her skull was white and total and made her vision go briefly dark at the edges. She took her fingers away. She would not press there again. If you are already caught up in this story, hit that like button and subscribe. It takes 2 seconds, and it means the world to me. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Now, let's get back to her. Her name was Camille Reyes, and she was 26 years old, and she had been surviving Marcus Vitale for exactly 2 years, 3 months, and 11 days, though she had only understood, in the deepest and most honest part of herself, that survival was what she was doing for the last 4 months of that count. Before the understanding, she had been doing what most people do when the world they are living in slowly becomes unrecognizable. She had been explaining. She had been contextualizing. She had been making room for nuance in situations that did not deserve nuance, offering the benefit of the doubt to a man who had used up every last cent of it and borrowed against future credit he would never earn back. He was under pressure at work. He hadn't slept. She had said the wrong thing, the wrong moment. She knew how to manage him better than that. The argument had escalated in a direction neither of them intended. These things happened between people who cared about each other. She had been doing all of that, quietly and industriously, for 27 months. 4 months ago, on a Tuesday evening in early November, her 4-year-old daughter Rosa had come to the doorway of the kitchen and watched Marcus shout at Camille over a grocery receipt with the particular stillness of a small child who has learned that stillness keeps you invisible. Rosa had stood there in her pajamas with the little yellow ducks on them, barefoot on the hardwood, her dark eyes going back and forth between her mother and the man who was not her father, with an expression of absolute, terrible calm. The expression of a child who has learned to be calm because calm is the only thing available. Camille had looked at her daughter's face and understood. She had started making plans that same night, quietly, carefully, the way you do when you know that the wrong move at the wrong moment can make things significantly worse before they get better. and she'd put money aside from her pharmacy paychecks. $30 here, $50 there, folded into the lining of her winter coat, where Marcus would never look, because Marcus had never once in 2 years done anything so domestic as checking the coat closet. She'd called her Aunt Pilar and explained, in the careful language of someone choosing their words around landmines, that she might need a place to stay at some point, with Rosa, just for a little while. Aunt Pilar had said nothing in response except, "The room is already made up." She'd said it the way people say things they have been waiting to say for a long time. Camille had intended to leave on a Friday. She had the date chosen. She had the bag packed and stored at the pharmacy, in the back of the supply closet behind the acetaminophen stock. She had the morning planned. Drop Rosa at Aunt Pilar's on the school run. Go to work. Call Marcus from the parking lot and tell him she wasn't coming back. She'd had the script rehearsed. She'd had the fantasy of his face when he understood that she was serious, that she had planned around him, that she had been 3 steps ahead the entire time. The Friday she had chosen was 4 days away. She had not made it to Friday. Marcus had come home tonight in a particular mood that she recognized from the set of his shoulders and the way he didn't put his keys on the hook by the door, just dropped them on the counter, like the hook was beneath him. She had been in the kitchen. Rosa was at Aunt Pilar's already, a small mercy in a night that was running low on them. Camille had been washing dishes, back to the door, when Marcus said her name in a tone that meant the evening was going to require every skill she had. She had turned. She had made the mistake of being calm. He could not stand her calm. She had known this for 2 years, and had never fully understood until tonight that her calmness wasn't the problem, that she could have arrived at that moment weeping, shouting, shaking, folded in on herself like a piece of paper, and it would not have changed what he intended to do. The calm wasn't the trigger. She was the trigger, simply by existing in the room. The calm was just the excuse he reached for on this particular Tuesday evening in January at 11 minutes past 9. She remembered looking at the clock above the stove as she hit the floor. 9:11. She remembered thinking it was almost time for her shift to start, and she remembered the floor being very cold against her cheek. She did not remember getting up. She did not remember getting out. She had pieces of the next 10 minutes the way you have pieces of a dream when you wake up. Impressionistic, fragmentary, unreliable. She remembered her coat. She remembered the back door, the cold hitting her face, the sound of his voice still going in the kitchen like she was still standing in it. She remembered the walk to the pharmacy being much longer than it usually was, the street lights doing strange things at the edges of her vision, a man walking his dog on 5th Avenue who looked at her face and then looked away with the particular commitment of someone who has decided very firmly that this is not their situation to enter. She remembered the supply closet. She remembered the restroom. She remembered the message she had sent, and the address, and Daniela. The phone buzzed against the tile floor. Camille opened her eyes. She hadn't realized they had closed. She reached down and picked up the phone and looked at the screen. "Where are you?" The message was from the number she had sent to, the number saved under Daniela in her contacts. She frowned, which was a mistake, because frowning used the muscles on the right side of her face, and those muscles were currently connected directly to whatever was wrong with her jaw, and the pain was blinding. She breathed through it, looked at the screen again. Daniela never texted like that. Daniela texted in full paragraphs. Daniela texted things like, "Oh my God, Cam, tell me everything. I'm already in my car. What happened? Are you safe? Should I bring snacks? Not 2 words. Not a question with no punctuation, no capitalization, no prelude of shock or concern. She typed back. In the restroom, back of the building, the door with the broken light. She watched the screen. 3 dots appeared immediately. Disappeared. Then, I'll be there in 8 minutes. Camille stared at that response for a very long time. Daniela lived 23 minutes away, on the other side of the city, and Daniela drove like someone who believed all speed limits were merely suggestions written by people with nothing interesting to do. At her fastest, on a good night, with light traffic, Daniela was never less than 15 minutes away from anywhere. 8 minutes was not Daniela. Camille looked at the contact name again, looked at the number beneath it. The first 7 digits were Daniela's number. She knew Daniela's number the way she knew her own birthday, and Rosa's favorite color, and the route she had driven to work for 3 years. The first 7 digits were exactly right. The last 3 were not. She had texted the wrong number. She sat with this for several seconds. The implications moved through her in slow, terrible waves. She had sent her location, this building, this door, this specific alley entrance, to a stranger's phone. A stranger who had replied, not with confusion or irritation or a polite clarification that they were not whoever she was trying to reach, but with, "Where are you? And then I'll be there in 8 minutes." A stranger who was, apparently, 8 minutes away. Her first instinct was to text back, to explain the mistake, to apologize, to say, "Never mind. Wrong number. I'm sorry for your trouble." Her fingers moved toward the keyboard. Then she looked at the supply closet behind her through the crack in the restroom door, at the bag she had packed so carefully over 3 months, at the coat she had managed to grab on the way out of her own kitchen, at the hands that had not stopped shaking for the last 40 minutes. She thought about where she could go in the next 8 minutes that was safer than here. She could not think of anywhere. She put the phone back on the floor. She was still sitting against the restroom wall when she heard a knock at the back entrance. Not loud, not impatient. 3 measured knocks with the particular rhythm of someone who is not accustomed to knocking but is making the effort. She got to her feet using the wall for support, picked up her bag, and pushed through the restroom door into the narrow back corridor of the pharmacy, past the stock shelves and the refrigerated medication units and the emergency eye wash station nobody ever used. The corridor ended at the back door with the broken light. She stopped with her hand on the handle. There was no rational reason to open this door. Every sensible thing in her told her not to open this door. She had made one terrible mistake tonight, by staying in a situation she should have left far sooner. She was contemplating making a second one. Then Marcus Vitale's voice played back in her memory, the particular register of it, the way it went quiet and precise right before things went worst. And she opened the door. The alley behind the pharmacy was dark, except for the ambient light of the street at either end. The cold hit her immediately. January cold. The kind that finds every gap in your clothing and settles into your bones like it intends to stay. There was a car parked directly behind the building that had not been there when Camille arrived for her shift at 8 o'clock. A large black car, spotless and silent, the engine off, the kind of vehicle that communicated wealth not through decoration, but through a certain absolute quality of manufacture. The kind of car that cost enough to make other cars feel self-conscious. Standing next to it, with his hands in the pockets of a dark coat, was a man. He was tall, taller than Marcus, who was tall, which meant this man was very tall, and broad across the shoulders in the way that speaks of genuine physical capability rather than effort. He had dark hair going gray at the temples, a jaw that might have been cut from something harder than ordinary material, and eyes that Camille could not make out in the low light, except that they were dark and they were already on her, had been on her from the moment she opened the door, with the complete and undivided focus of a person who does not often have to wait for anything. He looked at her face. She watched something happen behind his eyes. Not surprise, exactly. She would have expected surprise, and what she saw instead was more complicated than that. A kind of stillness that followed close on recognition, like a man who has identified something and has already, in the same instant, begun deciding what to do about it. He did not move toward her. "Camille Reyes," he said. Not a question. He said it the way you state a fact you have just confirmed. "I sent that message to the wrong number," she said. She was proud of her voice for coming out as steady as it did. "I'm sorry. You don't have to be here. But I am here. You should go. This was a mistake. You told me someone broke your jaw." He hadn't moved, hadn't taken his hands out of his pockets. He was still standing by the car, and yet his stillness had a quality to it that she couldn't explain. A kind of gravitational weight, as though the space around him had reorganized itself in deference to where he stood. "Was that a mistake too? Or is that actually what happened?" Camille said nothing. "Because if it happened," he said, "you need a hospital. And if you need a hospital, I can take you to one. That's all I'm offering. You don't have to get in the car." She looked at him. She looked at the car. She looked at the alley on either side, at the street beyond it, where ordinary life was going on. People walking home from restaurants and late movies, and the kinds of ordinary evenings that now seemed to belong to a different species of human being than the one she currently was. She looked back at the man. "Who are you?" she asked. He told her his name. She had heard the name before. Everyone in this city had heard the name before, in the way you hear about weather systems that are moving through somewhere far enough away that you don't need to worry about them yet. It was a name that belonged to a world she had no business being adjacent to, the kind of name that existed in the same category as headlines she scrolled past and conversations she did not involve herself in, and trouble that had nothing to do with her ordinary, careful, pharmacy-scented life. The name was Nico Ferrara. She stared at him. He stared back with perfect patience. "Get in the car," he said, "or don't. I'll wait." She got in the car. She told herself it was because her jaw was broken and her hands were still shaking, and the alternative was sitting alone in a pharmacy restroom until Daniela could get there. She told herself it was the most pragmatic decision available to her, given the circumstances. She told herself a lot of things, sitting in the back seat of a car so quiet that the click of the door closing behind her seemed too loud, watching Nico Ferrara walk around to the driver's side with the measured, unhurried pace of someone for whom urgency is a choice rather than a reflex. He got in. He did not look at her. He made one phone call in a voice low enough that she couldn't distinguish individual words, and then he drove. She would have told herself it was pragmatic regardless, because the truth she would only allow herself much later, in the particular honesty that comes at 3 a.m. when the defenses are down, was something simpler. The truth was that when he had said, "I am here," in that tone, with that quality of absolute fact in his voice. Something in her had recognized it. Some part of her that had been holding itself rigid and braced and ready for the next blow for 27 months had heard that sentence. And, against every instruction her survival instincts were sending, had exhaled. She looked out the window at the city going past. She did not ask where he was taking her. The building they arrived at was not what she expected, though she would have been hard-pressed to say what she had expected. She had perhaps imagined something that matched what she thought she knew about the name she was now sitting in a car with. Something imposing, guarded, architectural in its authority. Instead, they pulled into the underground parking structure of what appeared to be an ordinary high-rise apartment building in the quieter northern quarter of the city. Nicer than ordinary, she corrected herself, as they rode the elevator up to the 14th floor, the kind of building where the lobby had fresh flowers and the elevator didn't smell of anything. There was a man waiting when the elevator opened. Broad, dark-suited, his eyes doing the same thing Nico's had done, moving to her face first, then going very still. "Doctor, Samarin is on her way up," the man said to Nico. 15 minutes. Good. Nico was already moving down the hallway. Not touching her, not directing her, not doing anything except walking, and apparently assuming she would follow, which she did, because there was a logic to it that her battered mind accepted without analysis. "This is Vincent," he said, without breaking stride. "He works for me. He's not going to bother you." Vincent held the elevator without expression, and Camille walked past him down the hall. The apartment at the end of the hallway was large and quiet, and very dark, until Nico touched something near the door and the lights came up. Low and warm, the kind of lighting that suggests a consideration for human comfort. The furniture was substantial. The windows were floor to ceiling and showed the city below in all its indifferent, glittering sprawl. There were books. She noticed the books first, before the art or the quality of the materials, because the books looked read rather than arranged, which told her something she filed away without knowing why. "Sit down," Nico said. Not a command, exactly. A statement about what the available options were. He indicated a sofa upholstered in something dark and soft-looking. "Dr. Marin will need to look at your face. Don't eat or drink anything until she gets here." "Why?" "Because if your jaw is broken rather than fractured, she may need to set it, and she'll want an empty stomach." Camille sat. He went to the kitchen without asking if she wanted anything, and came back with a glass of water and a cold pack wrapped in a dishcloth, which he set on the coffee table in front of her. He did not sit. He stood with about 6 feet of space between them, which she appreciated, without being able to articulate why, and looked at her with that same quality of absolute, measured attention. "Tell me what happened," he said. "You don't need to know what happened." "I'd like to." "Why?" Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. His face was not built for easy smiling. She was already understanding that. It was more of a recognition that she had said a reasonable thing. "Because you're in my apartment, and someone put you in a hospital situation, and I like to understand what I'm dealing with." "I'm not something you're dealing with." "That came out wrong," he said, without inflection. "What I meant is that I don't do things without understanding their context. Now you can tell me later. Or you can not tell me at all." He moved to the armchair across from the sofa and sat, again with that quality of someone who has infinite time and knows it. "Are you afraid of me?" Camille looked at him steadily. "I should be." Probably. Are you going to give me a reason to be? The question sat between them for a moment. He looked at her with those dark, measuring eyes, and she had the distinct and disconcerting sense of being accurately assessed. Not catalogued, not diminished, not found wanting, but genuinely, carefully seen. As though whatever he was looking at, he was looking at honestly. "No," he said. "Not tonight." There was a knock at the door. The doctor arrived with a bag, and the brisk, unhurried efficiency of someone who has been called to unusual situations before and has made her professional peace with unusual. She was a woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back and hands that were steady and cool and careful against Camille's face. She asked questions in a calm, clinical sequence. When? How? Did she lose consciousness? Any vision changes? Any nausea? And Camille answered them in the flat, factual voice she had discovered over the last 40 minutes, was the voice she used when the alternative was crying. She did not look at Nico during this. She was aware of him the way you are aware of something large and present in your peripheral vision. Not threatening, exactly, but impossible to fully ignore. He had moved to stand by the windows at some point, his back to the room, to looking out at the city with his hands clasped behind him, giving her the privacy of his inattention, which was its own kind of attention, she thought, the deliberate, considered kind. "Fractured, not broken," the doctor said, her fingers making one final careful pass along Camille's jawline. "You were lucky, a few degrees in the other direction, and we'd be looking at a significantly more complicated situation." She produced a small flashlight and checked Camille's eyes, checked her ears, pressed with controlled precision in 2 other places on her skull that made Camille's vision go white for a moment. Mild concussion. You need rest, ice, anti-inflammatories, and you need someone to check on you every 2 hours through the night. Can you arrange that? "She'll be here," Nico said from the window, without turning around. Camille turned to look at him. He turned, then, and met her eyes. Not challenging, not commanding, just stating again, a fact. The doctor dispensed medication from her bag with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned not to ask too many questions about the circumstances in which her patients had acquired their injuries, left a list of warning signs, and was gone within 20 minutes of arriving. The apartment was quiet again. Camille sat on the sofa with the cold pack against her jaw and looked at Nico Ferrara, who had just told a doctor that she would be spending the night in his apartment without asking Camille whether that was what she wanted, and waited to feel the particular cold fury that had always come over the past 27 months when a man made a decision on her behalf. It didn't come. What came instead was something more confusing. The exhaustion of someone who has been carrying something enormous and has been told, abruptly, that she can put it down for the night. A disorientation born not from fear, but from the unfamiliar and almost overwhelming sensation of being somewhere that did not require her vigilance. "I'm not staying," she said. "I have somewhere I can go. My aunt. It's 1:30 in the morning. She won't mind." "You have a concussion." He said it without emotion, the way a person states a weather condition. Dr. Marin was very specific about the monitoring requirement. "Does your aunt know what to look for?" Camille's silence was its own answer. Nico looked at her for a moment, then looked away, out the windows at the city below. In the low light, she could see the line of his jaw, for the gray at his temples, the particular quality of stillness that had struck her even in the alley, the quality of a person for whom the world has been arranged, over a long time and through significant effort, to move at his pace. "There's a guest room," he said. "It has a lock on the inside. Vincent will check on you every 2 hours as Dr. Marin instructed. You don't need to tell me anything you don't want to tell me. In the morning, when you're ready, someone will drive you wherever you want to go." Camille thought about this. She thought about Aunt Pilar's face when she opened the door at 1:30 in the morning and saw what Marcus had done. She thought about the particular grief that would be in that face, the grief of a woman who had been waiting for this call for 2 years and had thought it might come differently, had perhaps hoped it would come differently. She thought about Rosa, asleep in the small room at Aunt Pilar's, with the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that Pilar had put up herself, unaware that her mother's carefully constructed plan had collapsed 3 days early and 20 years too late. She thought about the lock on the inside of the guest room door. "I need to make a phone call first," she said. "Of course." He moved to leave the room. "You don't have to. You can have the privacy," he said simply, and walked out. She called Daniela first, because Daniela had gotten a text that said he broke my jaw, and there had been no follow-up, which meant that somewhere across the city, Daniela was either already in her car, or had called the police, or was doing both simultaneously while crying. She was in her car. She was doing 80 on the expressway. She was doing all of this and crying. Camille told her to slow down, told her she was safe, told her she was being taken care of, and listened to the sound of Daniela trying to breathe through the news with the particular patience of someone who has delivered bad news before and knows that the receiver needs a moment. "Where are you?" Daniela said, when she had the breathing under control. "I'll explain in the morning." "Camille, I'm safe, I promise. Someone is looking after me." "Who? Whose place is this?" "In the morning," she said again. "Just don't call Marcus. Don't go near him. Just go home." There was a long silence. "He broke your jaw," Daniela said. It was not a question. It was the specific flatness of a sentence that someone is saying out loud to make themselves accept the reality of it. "Yes." Another silence. Longer. "I'm going to need his address eventually," Daniela said. "Go home, Danny." She called Aunt Pilar next. Aunt Pilar, who was a woman of formidable reserves and small ceremony, listened to the compressed version of events without interruption, and then said, "Rosa is asleep and doesn't know anything. You did the right thing getting out. Come when you're ready." Then she asked, with the particular precision of a woman who has been paying attention for 2 years, "Is the place you're at actually safe, or is this a different kind of danger?" Camille thought about this honestly. "I'm not completely sure," she said. "Santa, but I think so." "You think so isn't the same as you know so." "I know, but I think it might be the closest I'm going to get tonight." Pilar was quiet for a moment. "Call me in the morning, before 9. Rosa will be up by then, and she'll want to hear your voice." "I will." She set the phone on the couch cushion beside her and sat quietly in the warm dark of the living room. The city spread below the windows in all directions, indifferent and alive. Somewhere out there, Marcus Vitale was in the kitchen of their apartment, and she did not know what he was doing, and was surprised to find that the not knowing carried less weight than she'd expected. She had been afraid of not knowing for 2 years. She had always monitored his position, his mood, the barometric pressure of his presence. but knowing where he was had felt like something close to safety. It had never been safety. It had just been the closest thing available. Nico came back through the door with 2 cups of something. Tea, she realized, from the smell, and set one on the coffee table in front of her without asking. He sat in the armchair again. He did not ask about the phone calls. He picked up the book from the side table beside him and opened it to a page he'd marked, and he read. She stared at him. He read for approximately 3 minutes before he looked up. "You're going to tell me I should be more frightened of you," she said. "No." He turned a page. "You already know who I am. You're smart enough to have weighed what that means. Whatever you've decided, you've decided." "And if I'd decided to leave?" "Then Vincent would have driven you. See, that's still available." She looked at the tea on the table. She looked at the cold pack. She looked at the window and the city and the particular quality of quiet in the room around her. "I texted you by accident," she said. "You know that." "I know. You didn't have to come." He was quiet for a moment. He looked at his book, and then he set it down on the arm of the chair, and he looked at her with that direct, dark gaze that she was already beginning to understand was the only way he looked at anything. 8 words, he said. "Someone sent me 8 words and an address." He paused. "I didn't have to come." But the words were honest, and the address was specific, and the person who sent them had clearly decided that asking for help was worth the risk of asking a stranger. Something in his voice shifted, and so slightly she almost didn't catch it. "I find I have a certain respect for that kind of decision." Camille looked at him. There was something in his face, in that moment, that she couldn't name yet. She was too exhausted and too hurt and too deep inside the disorientation of the night to name it. But she would come back to it later, in the way you come back to a sentence you read too fast and know you missed something. She picked up the tea. It was chamomile, with something else she couldn't identify, and it was exactly the right temperature. She drank it slowly and said nothing, and looked at the city below, and Nico Ferrara read his book in the armchair across from her, and the room was quiet in the way that rooms are quiet when the storm has passed through and left behind something altered, though whether altered for better or worse was not yet something either of them could have told you. The guest room had a lock on the inside as promised, a heavy one, well-maintained, the kind that engaged with a solid click that you felt in your hand. Camille checked it 3 times before she sat on the edge of the bed, which was a real bed, wide and firm, and made up with the kind of linen that costs more than her weekly paycheck and smells of nothing except clean. She sat on the edge of it and held her phone and looked at her contacts list and found Daniela's name and looked at the number below it. Then she scrolled up, 1 contact above Daniela. The name at the top of her recent messages was simply the number itself, since she hadn't saved it to a contact. 11 digits. The wrong digits. The ones that had not been Daniela's. She looked at it for a long time. Then she turned off the light and lay down on the clean, expensive linen and listened to the city outside the window of a life she did not belong in. And somewhere in the listening, she fell asleep, which was the first time in 27 months that she had fallen asleep without listening first for footsteps in the hall. She did not hear footsteps. She heard nothing but the city, indifferent and vast, doing what it always did. She slept. In the morning, the apartment smelled of coffee. Camille woke to the particular disorientation of an unfamiliar ceiling and the secondary, sharper disorientation of the pain that announced itself the moment she was conscious enough to receive it. The right side of her face was a contained catastrophe. She pressed the tips of her fingers to it carefully, remembering the doctor's instruction, and the pain confirmed everything she'd been told the night before. Fracture, not break. You were lucky. She lay still for a moment, looking at the ceiling. She thought about Rosa's voice on the phone this morning, which she had promised Pilar. She thought about the bag in the pharmacy supply closet, with its 3 months of careful preparation. She thought about Friday, which had been her planned departure date, and which was now 3 days and a lifetime away on the other side of last night. She thought about Marcus. She thought about the fact that she had left his apartment without her coat. She had found the coat. She must have grabbed it on the way out. She was wearing it in the alley when the car pulled up. And then she stopped thinking about Marcus with the particular deliberateness of a woman who has decided that a thought, once identified, does not have to be followed to its conclusion. She unlocked the guest room door. The hallway was quiet. The apartment beyond was also quiet, but the coffee smell was definitive, and when she followed it, she found the kitchen, which was large and had windows facing east with the morning light coming through them at an angle that made everything warm. There was a coffee pot on the counter. There was a note on the table beside an empty cup. The handwriting was precise, not elegant. The writing of someone who values clarity over flourish. I have an early meeting. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen. Vincent is outside the front door, but he'll drive you wherever you need to go. For below this, in the same precise script, the offer stands if you need it. You can stay here until you've decided what's next. No conditions on that. It isn't a negotiation. She read the note twice. Then she poured herself coffee and stood at the east-facing window and watched the morning light do its work on the city below. And she let herself, very carefully, think about what it meant that the most dangerous man she had ever been in a room with had taken one look at her face in a dark alley and driven her to his apartment and called a doctor and brought her tea and then left her a note saying, "It isn't a negotiation." She did not know what it meant. She did not need to know yet. She had 3 days until Friday, which was no longer the plan it had been. No, and she had Rosa's voice to hear before 9. And she had a fractured jaw, and a concussion, and a bag in a supply closet, and a life that needed to be reconstructed from the materials available. She drank the coffee. She thought. Outside the window, 14 floors below, the city was going about its enormous, indifferent morning the way it always did. Buses and deliveries, and people with their heads down against the January cold. All of it moving with the inexorable momentum of a world that does not pause for anyone's private catastrophe. She had always found this fact about cities either comforting or brutal, depending on the day. This morning, it felt surprisingly like the former. She was still there, still in the city, still upright, still thinking. The world had not paused to register what had happened to her last night, but she was still in it. Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. It wasn't Daniela. It was not Pilar. It was the 11-digit number without a name. The message said, "How are you feeling this morning?" She looked at the message for a moment. Then she looked out the window. Then she typed back. Like someone broke my jaw. 3 dots appeared. Then, that tracks. Eat something before you leave. There's bread in the second cabinet. She stared at the screen. There was, in fact, bread in the second cabinet. She found it without any trouble, because the second cabinet was directly in front of her, and the kitchen was the kind of kitchen where everything is exactly where it makes sense to be. Organized with the same deliberate, quiet intention she was starting to understand, characterized everything about the person who lived here. She made toast. She ate it standing at the east-facing window with the morning light on her face, and she thought about 8 words sent to a wrong number, and a dark alley, and a car appearing in it, like an answer she hadn't known she was looking for, and a man who had told her that her presence in his apartment was not a negotiation. She thought about all of it. Then she picked up her phone and called Aunt Pilar's number, because it was 7:58, and Rosa would be up and wanting to hear her voice, and that was the most important thing. That was the only thing that had ever mattered. The rest, all of it, the plan, the next steps, the question of what came after the morning when you survived the night that was supposed to break you, the rest could wait until she had heard her daughter's voice. "Mama," Rosa said. Well, when Pilar passed her the phone, the word landed in Camille's chest like something coming home. "Hi, baby," she said. "I'm okay. I'm going to come see you today." "Are you at work?" "Not exactly. I'm at a friend's house. Can I come?" "Soon," Camille said. "Very soon." She closed her eyes and listened to her daughter's voice, and the morning light came through the windows of a stranger's kitchen. And somewhere in this city, in a meeting she had no access to, a man who had answered a wrong number in the middle of the night was going about the business of being what he was, which was powerful and dangerous, and apparently, impossibly, the person her accident had found when she needed a door to be opened. The city moved below. She was still in it. That was enough, for now. That was everything. She left the apartment at 9:47. So with Vincent driving and the cold January morning pressing flat and gray against the car windows, and the whole ride to Aunt Pilar's, she sat in the back seat, watching the city go past, and tried to organize what she knew about the next 24 hours into something that resembled a plan. What she knew, Rosa was safe. Aunt Pilar's building had a door code that Marcus did not have, and a superintendent named Gennaro, who had once physically removed a man from the lobby for making a woman uncomfortable near the mailboxes without being asked, and who did not regret it. What she knew, her bag was in the pharmacy supply closet, 3 months of careful preparation intact, and she needed to collect it before her shift tonight, which she was going to call in sick for, which was fine because she had sick days banked. What she knew, her jaw was fractured, and she had a mild concussion, and she needed to stop touching the right side of her face. What she did not know was considerably more. She did not know what Marcus had done after she left. She did not know if he'd gone looking for her, if he'd called anyone, if he'd settled into the specific cold fury that in her experience always followed the other kind and began the methodical work of damage control. She did not know what story he was telling. She had learned over 27 months that Marcus was very good at stories. He was the kind of man who could describe a situation he had created and make it sound like something that had simply happened, like weather, like something nobody was responsible for. He was skilled at the particular narrative where he was not the agent of anything, or where things unfolded around him, where he was always, at worst, a reasonable person who had been provoked beyond what a reasonable person could bear. She had believed that narrative for far longer than she should have. She was not going to believe it again. Aunt Pilar opened the door before Camille could knock. She had been watching for the car from the front window, which was the kind of detail about Pilar that made Camille love her in a way that went below words, into the register of things that simply are. And her face did what Pilar's face always did, which was show exactly what she felt without performance or management. What it showed when she saw Camille's jaw was grief and rage and relief in that order. And then she opened her arms and Camille walked into them and stood there for a long moment in the hallway, smelling her aunt's perfume and not crying, which took effort. "Rosa is in the kitchen," Pilar said against her hair. "She made you a drawing." "What kind?" "A butterfly, I think. Or possibly a rocket ship. She explained it to me, but I may have gotten confused." Camille laughed, which was a mistake. Laughing used the muscles. And then she went to the kitchen. Rosa was at the table with markers and a large piece of paper, and the focused expression she wore when she was working on something important, the expression that was entirely her own, and that Camille could watch for hours without understanding where it had come from. 4 years old, and already containing so much that was entirely and specifically herself. The drawing was probably a butterfly. It might have been a rocket ship. It was definitively purple. She looked up when Camille came in, and something moved across her small face. Not the alarm that Camille had been quietly dreading. The "what happened to you" that a child asks when a parent looks wrong, but something quieter than that. Camille was beginning to understand that Rosa had learned in the way that small children in complicated households learn, to notice and not ask. The understanding of this was something she carried now, the way you carry a thing that has weight. "I made you a butterfly," Rosa said. "It's beautiful," Camille said. She pulled the chair out next to her daughter and sat down carefully. "Can I have it?" "It's for you," Rosa said, with the particular seriousness of a 4-year-old discussing matters of importance. "Nah, I made it this morning. I can tell you worked very hard on it." "I did." Rosa leaned over and patted Camille's arm with the flat of her hand, the gesture she made when she was conferring comfort, without having words for the specific circumstance. "Are you okay, Mama?" "I am," Camille said. "I'm getting better." Rosa looked at her for a moment, really looked, with those dark, watchful eyes, and then nodded, as though she had received information she intended to verify through continued observation, and went back to her drawing. Pilar made coffee and did not ask questions, which was the second reason Camille loved her in the way that goes below words. She would ask eventually. She would ask everything, and Camille would tell her everything. And they would sit at this table together, and Pilar would say things that were useful and practical and periodically furious on Camille's behalf, and that conversation would happen when it happened. For now, there was coffee and a butterfly that might be a rocket ship and Rosa's markers squeaking across the paper. And this was enough. If you're as deep into this story as I am right now, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. I upload new stories every week, and you don't want to miss what's coming. Your support is the reason I keep going. Now, back to them. She called in sick to the pharmacy at noon, and then drove Pilar's car to the building on Carmine and 5th, and went in through the back entrance in the middle of her co-worker Benny's shift, which meant she had to explain the jaw to someone, which she did in the fewest words available. Benny listened to the fewest words with the expression of a man who had suspected something along these lines for some time, and said, "Your bag's right where you left it?" You want me to walk you out?" "I'm fine," she said. "The offer's there," he said. "For whatever it's worth." She took the bag and walked out through the back entrance and stood in the alley with the bag over her shoulder and looked at the spot where a black car had appeared last night, as though in response to something she'd sent out into the dark. Her phone buzzed. It was the 11-digit number. "Are you at the pharmacy?" She stared at the message. Then she typed, "How do you know that?" The response came quickly. "I don't." "I was asking. Are you all right?" She looked up at the alley, and then down at her phone and typed, "How did you get to that alley in 8 minutes?" A pause. Then, "I was nearby." "Nearby how? That's a longer answer. Are you somewhere safe right now?" She thought about Pilar's building. She thought about Gennaro, the superintendent. She thought about the door code that Marcus did not have. "Yes," she typed. "I'm with family." "Good. Stay there tonight if you can. Don't go back to your apartment." She stood very still in the alley. "Why?" she typed. Nothing for a moment. Then, "Because Marcus Vitale isn't someone who lets things go. And this morning, his car was parked outside your building for 2 hours. The cold in the alley became a different kind of cold. She had known this. In the abstract way you know things about people you have lived with for years. She had known Marcus would look for her. She had known that the plan she'd been building, the careful, quiet Friday plan, had the advantage of surprise, of leaving before he knew to watch. She had left without that advantage. She had left in the middle of an argument with a broken jaw and no coat, which meant he knew she was gone, and he knew she was hurt, and he knew, with the particular certainty of someone who has spent 2 years learning her patterns, exactly where she would go. He knew about Pilar. He had been to the apartment. He would go to Pilar next. She was already calling Pilar before she had fully processed the thought. "Lock the front door," she said when Pilar picked up. "The deadbolt, both of them, and call Gennaro." Pilar did not ask why. She said, "Already done. He's in the lobby." Then, in the same tone, "He's coming, isn't he?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do." There was a silence. "Camille," Pilar said, "Rosa and I are fine. You make sure you're fine." She called the number back. Not a text, an actual call, which felt like crossing a line she hadn't fully thought through. But the thinking through time was a luxury she didn't have at the moment. It rang twice. "He knows where my family is," she said, when he picked up. "He's going to go there." Nico's voice was exactly as it had been in the apartment. Calm, unhurried, the voice of someone for whom emergency operates at a different frequency. "How many people are at this location?" "My aunt and my daughter, and the superintendent." "Address." She gave it to him. "What's the super's name?" "Gennaro." She spelled it. "Give me 20 minutes. A brief pause. "Is your aunt's building secure on the upper floors?" "3rd floor. The elevator requires a key after 6. "Good. Tell them to stay on the 3rd floor. Another pause, shorter this time, the pause of someone making assessments in real time. "Camille, Marcus Vitale is not going to reach your family. I need you to understand that as a fact, not a reassurance." Something in her chest, which had been very tight for the last 20 minutes, loosened approximately 1 degree. "I'm on my way back there," she said. "You should be." She went back to Pilar's building. Gennaro was in the lobby when she came in, a broad man in his 60s, with forearms like load-bearing beams, who nodded at her once and said nothing, which was the most comforting thing anyone had said to her all day. She took the elevator to the 3rd floor and knocked, and heard the deadbolt turn, and went inside, and found Rosa in the living room with her markers, apparently unaware that anything in the world had changed, which was the mercy of 4 years old. Pilar looked at her face, not the jaw, her actual face. "Who did you call?" Pilar said. "Someone who can help." What kind of someone? Camille thought about how to answer this. She thought about the quality of the quiet in that apartment, the precise handwriting, the east-facing windows, Vincent outside the door. She thought about the 8-minute drive from wherever he had been to that alley. "The kind that was nearby," she said. Pilar looked at her for a long moment, with the particular expression she had worn since Camille was small, and the expression that meant she was deciding how much to press. Then she went to the kitchen and put the kettle on, and Camille understood that the decision had been made, and the pressing would wait. 40 minutes later, her phone buzzed. "2 of my people are outside. Gennaro knows them. Marcus Vitale will not be a problem at this address." She typed back, "Thank you." A pause. Then, "How's your jaw?" "Terrible." That tracks. She stared at the screen for a moment. Then, for reasons she didn't fully examine, "You quoted my own line back at me." Another pause. Then, and she would think about this later, she would return to it the way she returned to the sentence she'd missed in his face the night before. "I was paying attention. The 2 men Nico sent were not obviously what they were. That was the first thing she noticed when Gennaro brought her downstairs to meet them. They did not look like what she would have imagined, which was something large and declarative. They were simply 2 men in dark coats who stood near the lobby entrance with the casual, unhurried posture of people who have nowhere in particular to be. One of them was perhaps 30, with a face that gave nothing away. The other was older, with gray at his ears and the kind of eyes that move constantly without appearing to. They introduced themselves with first names only. They did not explain anything. They said they would be there, and the word "there" had a weight to it that she found, against all reasonable expectation, genuinely steadying. She went back upstairs. Rosa wanted to show her a new drawing she was working on. This one involving a cat and possibly a submarine. And Camille sat on Pilar's living room floor and looked at the drawing and made the appropriate noises of admiration and tried to organize, in the background of her mind, what the next several days required. The Friday plan was gone. The carefully constructed surprise of it, the clean departure while Marcus was expecting a normal evening, that was gone. He knew she had left. He knew she was hurt. He would be working already on the version of events that made him the wronged party, consulting whoever he consulted when he needed things managed. Marcus had connections she had never fully understood. He operated in the fringe space between legitimate business and the other kind, managing money for people who needed their money managed quietly, and the people whose money he managed had a certain influence that had always made her uneasy in the abstract, and now made her uneasy in the very specific. He was not going to let this go, because she had a door code and a superintendent and 2 men in the lobby whose names she didn't know. He was going to come at this from an angle she hadn't anticipated. That was how he operated. That was what he always did. She was still sitting on the floor thinking about this when her phone rang. Daniela. She answered. "I need to tell you something," Daniela said without preamble. "And I need you to not be upset at me for how I found out." "What did you do?" "I looked up the number, the wrong number, the one you texted last night." A pause. "Cam." "I know. You know who." Yes. A longer pause. Daniela was a person who expressed alarm through volume and velocity, and when she went quiet, it meant the alarm had exceeded those channels. You stayed in his apartment. I had a concussion. Camille. I know. Do you know? Daniela stopped, started again. Do you understand the specific person whose apartment you stayed in? I understand more than I did 24 hours ago. He is not. He's not like Marcus. I'm not saying he's like Marcus, but he's... Daniela made a sound. He's a different category of situation. Do you understand what I'm saying? I understand. And you're okay with that? She thought about the note on the table, the bread in the second cabinet. It isn't a negotiation. I didn't say I was okay with it. I said I understand it. Daniela breathed into the phone for a moment. Are you safe? I think so. Are you going back there? This was the question she had been avoiding asking herself. She looked at the door of Pilar's apartment, which was double-locked, and at Gennaro's number on the little notepad on the table, and at Rosa on the floor with her markers, and she thought about the two men in the lobby below, and what it had taken for them to be there. I don't know yet, she said. Keep me updated, Daniela said. Every hour. I mean it. Every hour, or I'm calling the police. The police won't... I know the police won't do anything, but I'll feel better if I'm doing something. She promised to update Daniela every hour. She hung up and sat for a moment holding the phone, looking at her daughter on the floor, and then she opened her recent messages and looked at the 11-digit number and typed. Can I ask you something? The reply was almost immediate. Yes. Last night. You showed up in 8 minutes. You knew where the pharmacy was. You knew my name before I told you. You already had a doctor on call. She stopped. Then, how much did you know before you arrived? A pause. Longer than the others. Enough to know you were telling the truth. And enough to know you needed help before I did. She stared at this. What does that mean? She typed. It means I had about 4 minutes between your text and leaving. In those 4 minutes, I had someone run the pharmacy address and pull whatever was publicly available on the number. A pause. Your name was listed as an employee on the pharmacy's website. And the doctor? Doctor. Marin is on call for situations that need quiet medical attention. She's not unusual for my world. Camille sat with this for a long moment. Then, you ran a background check on me in 4 minutes and still came. You said he broke your jaw. That seemed like the relevant data point. She looked out Pilar's window at the gray January afternoon. She thought about a man looking at 8 words on a phone in the middle of the night and deciding, in 4 minutes, that the relevant data point was not the risk or the unknown or the wrong number, but the jaw. She did not know what to do with that. She was still thinking about it 2 hours later when she heard Pilar say her name from the kitchen in the particular tone that meant something needed her attention now. And she went to the kitchen and found Pilar standing at the window that faced the street below. Marcus's car was parked across from the building. He wasn't in it. The car was simply there, engine off, sitting in the January afternoon like a declaration. She knew the car. Dark blue, practical, expensive in an understated way. The way everything about Marcus was expensive in an understated way. He drove it the way he did everything, as a statement about who he was that he wanted you to receive without him having to make it explicitly. Her hands went cold. She texted the number. He's outside. The car. She sent the cross streets. The reply came in under a minute. I see it. Don't go near the windows. I'm sending someone to speak with him." Well, she started to type, "What does speak with him mean?" and then stopped because she wasn't sure she wanted the detailed answer to that question. She stayed away from the windows. 10 minutes later, the car was gone. She didn't ask what had happened. She stood in Pilar's kitchen and breathed and felt Rosa lean against her leg from behind, the warm, solid weight of her, and she put her hand on her daughter's head and breathed. Her phone buzzed. "He won't be back tonight, but this is going to need a more permanent solution." A pause. "Can we meet tomorrow? I'd like to talk through the situation properly. Somewhere you're comfortable." She thought about this. "The pharmacy closes at 8, she typed. "There's a coffee place across the street. I'll be there at 8:15. The coffee place was called Mira's, and it had been there for 20 years without changing anything about itself, which was a quality Camille had always found deeply reassuring. The same tables, the same menu board and the same handwriting, the same woman named Mira working the counter on Tuesday evenings, who had been working it since before Camille had started her shifts at the pharmacy across the street. She arrived at 8:12 with her bag on her shoulder and her jaw aching, and ordered chamomile because the thought of caffeine at this particular moment felt wrong. And she sat at the corner table by the window and watched the door. He arrived at 8:15. She had thought, in the hours since their last exchange, that perhaps the memory of him was larger than the reality. This was a thing that happened with significant experiences. The mind enlarged them in the processing. She had been prepared to find the reality slightly smaller than the impression. The reality was not smaller. Nico Ferrara walked into Mira's coffee shop the way he had walked into every space she'd observed him in, with the absolute, unhurried confidence of someone who has not needed to announce himself for a very long time. He was wearing the same dark coat. He looked at the room once, with that comprehensive, rapid assessment, and then he looked at her and came directly to the table and sat down. He ordered an espresso from the waitress, who materialized near his elbow, with a swiftness that Camille suspected was less about efficient service and more about something in the quality of his presence. "You look better than last night," he said. "Low bar." "Fair." He looked at her jaw for a moment, the same look the doctor had given it, clinical and assessing, not prurient. And then he looked at her face. She had the same experience she'd had in the apartment, the experience of being genuinely and specifically seen, which was either very safe or very dangerous, and she had not yet determined which. "I want to explain something about last night," he said. "About Marcus's car this afternoon." "Okay." Marcus Vitale manages money for several people. Some of those people have interests that overlap with mine. Not directly, and not in ways that require any contact, but we occupy adjacent spaces in this city. He said this with the matter-of-fact clarity of someone who sees no point in euphemism when precision is available. "When I had you run last night, I recognized his name." She processed this. "You know him?" "I know of him. I know who he works for, and I know that the people he works for have a general understanding of who I am, and a general preference for not creating conflict with me unnecessarily." He turned the espresso cup once on its saucer, a small, precise movement. "What I'm telling you is that the conversation my people had with Marcus this afternoon was straightforward. He understands now that any further attempt to locate or contact you or your family will be treated as a problem that needs solving. And he understands what my involvement in solving problems tends to look like." Camille looked at him steadily. "You threatened him," she said. "I communicated a position." "That's the same thing. In this case, Yes. He met her eyes without deflection. I want to be clear about what I did and what I didn't do. I didn't make any promises about what comes after. I bought you time and I established a line. What you do with that time is entirely yours to decide. She looked down at her chamomile. She thought about Marcus's car disappearing from the street. She thought about Pilar and Rosa on the 3rd floor, behind a locked door, with 2 men below who were there because of a wrong number, and a man who had decided, for reasons she was still trying to understand, that she was worth the expenditure. Why? She said. Not for the first time. She was beginning to understand that this question was going to keep surfacing until she had an answer she could accept. Nico was quiet for a moment. He looked out the window at the street, at the pharmacy, at the ordinary Tuesday evening traffic, at the city doing its city things without comment on any of the specific human dramas playing out inside it. I have a nephew, he said. She hadn't expected that. Okay. He's 6 years old. My sister's son. She died 3 years ago. He said this without ornamentation, the way he said everything that had weight, directly, without padding. His name is Matteo. He lives with me. She waited. Matteo's mother left his father when Matteo was 2, took the boy and ran. The way people run when they understand the situation won't change on its own. He turned the espresso cup again. She made it out. She had a few good months, and then she didn't. He stopped, started again. The reason she didn't have nothing to do with Marcus Vitale, but the shape of it was the same. A woman trying to protect her child from a situation she shouldn't have been in, running out of runway before she could reach safety. The coffee shop made its quiet sounds around them. The espresso machine. Mira saying something to a customer at the counter. Rain beginning at the windows, very soft. More mist than rain. I'm not going to tell you that's the whole reason, Nico said. I don't do things for single reasons. But it's a reason. You texted me 8 words in the middle of the night, and one of them was jaw, and another was home, and I thought about Matteo. And I came. Camille looked at the man across from her. He was looking at her with that same directness, not asking her to feel any particular way about what he'd said, not managing her response or watching to see if he'd achieved an effect. He had said a true thing, and he was simply sitting with it. She thought about the note on the table that morning. It isn't a negotiation. What happened to his father? She said. A pause. He's no longer a concern. She understood this to mean something that she did not ask him to elaborate on, because there are categories of information that it is better not to have formally, and she had already identified this as one of them. Matteo, she said. He's okay. Something changed in Nico's face. It was subtle, the change. A slight shift in the set of his jaw, the eyes going from assessing to something more interior for just a moment. He's better than he was. He asks a lot of questions. He has a lot of opinions about things that don't require opinions. He stopped. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but adjacent to one. He thinks the best solution to most problems is more cheese. Camille looked at him. She thought about Rosa and her purple butterfly rocket ship. My daughter is 4, she said. Her name is Rosa. She thinks purple is the only color worth using for anything important. The corner of his mouth moved again. This time it was close enough to a smile that she decided to count it. Matteo would probably agree with that, he said. He draws everything in whatever marker is closest, which is usually not purple. But I think the spirit is similar. The rain at the window was soft and steady now. The coffee shop was warm against it, The particular warmth of a place that has been warm in the same way for 20 years and knows what it's doing. Camille wrapped both hands around her chamomile cup and thought about a 6-year-old with opinions about cheese and a 4-year-old with opinions about purple. And she thought about the odd and specific way that children can make the architecture of very complicated adult situations seem temporarily, mercifully navigable. "I need to understand something," she said. "What you're doing, the 2 men at Pilar's building, the conversation with Marcus. What does that mean for what I owe you? Because I've lived in a situation where I owed someone, and I know what that looks like. And I need to know what this is before I accept any more of it." Nico looked at her for a long moment. "It means nothing," he said. "It means you don't owe me anything. I helped because I chose to. There's no ledger." He said this with the same directness with which he said everything. "If you want to walk out of this coffee shop and never contact me again, I'll make sure Marcus understands the situation won't change regardless. The line I drew is not contingent on your continued presence in my life. It's done." She looked at him. "That's not how things work," she said. "It's how I say things work. In my experience, that's sufficient." She thought about this. She thought about the note. No conditions on that. She thought about the fact that she had sent him a wrong number text, and he had shown up and had been showing up quietly at every interval since, without requiring anything in return that she could identify. She thought about the fact that she did not entirely know what to do with a person who helped without a price. Well, she was out of practice. She had been out of practice for 2 years, maybe longer. "The permanent solution," she said. "You mentioned one." He set his espresso cup down. "Marcus Vitale keeps accounts. Money that moves through channels that are not entirely legal. Some of those channels pass through networks that are, let's say, visible to me." He was precise about this. She was already understanding, always precise, always calibrating exactly how much he was giving. There's a version of this where that information becomes available to people who find it useful. That would make Marcus significantly more concerned about his own situation than about yours. It would redirect his attention in a way that's permanent. She understood this too, in the same category as the previous understanding. "That's not the only option," she said. "No. So there's also the version where you file a police report for what he did, document the injury, pursue it legally. That's a slower path, and it has significant risks given his connections, but it exists. Or there's the version where you disappear, properly with support, and he simply can't find you." He paused. "The choice is yours. Completely." She looked at the window, at the pharmacy across the street, the place she had worked for 3 years, where the broken light at the back entrance had still not been fixed, where she had sat on a bathroom floor with a cracked jaw and typed 8 words to the wrong number. "I want to think about it," she said. "Of course. And I want to see Matteo." He looked at her. "Not yet," she said. "I'm not saying now. But you said he's sick and he has a lot of opinions. What, and if Rosa is going to be anywhere near your world at any point, I want to know who's in it." Something moved across his face, the same interior shift she'd caught before, the place behind the eyes where the composed exterior had a seam. He looked at her with the directness he always used and said, "He'd like Rosa's theories about purple. He has a lot of theories about colors, too, most of them wrong, but he holds them with conviction." "That's very much the age," she said. "Yes," he said. And then, after a pause, "It is." They sat in Mira's coffee shop for another half hour in the warm against the rain, and they talked, not about Marcus, or the options, or the permanent solution, or any of the things that constituted the actual architecture of the situation. They talked the way people talk when they are finding out about each other in the register that matters, the specific conversation that has nothing to do with logistics and everything to do with the shape of a person. She told him about the pharmacy, about how she'd gotten the job and what she liked about the night shift, the particular quality of the city in the hours between midnight and 4, when it thinned out and went honest. He told her about Mateo's school, the one he'd spent 2 months researching before he chose it, and about the lunch Mateo had declared inedible just that morning with the devastating sincerity of a 6-year-old. She did not ask about his work. He did not offer. There would be time for that. Or there wouldn't, and that would also be its own kind of answer. When she stood to leave, he stood too, reflexive. The way some gestures are so deeply trained, they precede thought. He reached for his coat. He looked at her jaw one more time, with that same clinical, genuine care. "Go back to your aunt's tonight," he said. "Tomorrow, if you want. I can have someone help you collect the rest of what you need from your apartment while Marcus is at his office. He's usually in meetings until 3 on Wednesdays." She looked at him. "You know his schedule." "I looked at it this afternoon." "Why?" "Because," he said, with the simplest and most complete honesty she had ever heard in the word, "I wanted to know when it was safe for you to move." She stood with that for a moment. The coffee shop moved around them, ordinary and warm, and the rain was on the windows. And she was 26 years old with a fractured jaw, and a 4-year-old, and a life she was rebuilding from whatever was left. "Thank you," she said, "for the bread." In the second cabinet. He looked at her for a moment, and the corner of his mouth moved. "There's more where that came from," he said, "if you need it." She went out into the rain. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, just outside the door, feeling the mist on her face, carefully, just the left side, where it didn't hurt. And she looked up at the pharmacy across the street with its broken light and its supply closet and the particular weight of a plan she'd built over 3 months, which had failed in this specific way and then been rescued in a way she could never have anticipated. She thought about the way plans fail. She thought about what you do when the plan you've been building collapses 3 days early and leaves you in an alley with a fractured jaw and nowhere to go except toward a wrong number that turned into a right one. She thought about the way Nico had said, "I wanted to know when it was safe for you to move." Not, "I wanted to know your schedule." Not, "I looked into him." He had named what the information was for. He had told her the purpose, the specific consideration that had motivated the action, as plainly and directly as someone tells you the weather. She had not experienced, in a very long time, the feeling of being someone whose safety was the organizing principle of another person's behavior. She had forgotten that it was a feeling you could have. She walked back to Pilar's building in the January rain, and the 2 men in the lobby nodded at her when she came in, and she took the elevator to the 3rd floor and knocked and heard the deadbolt turn and went inside. Rosa was asleep in the small room, one arm around the stuffed elephant that went everywhere with her, the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling doing their small, patient work in the dark. Camille stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then she went to the living room and sat with Pilar, and she told her everything. All of it. The wrong number, the alley, the apartment, the note, the 2 men, the coffee shop, all of it. Pilar listened without interruption. This was remarkable, because Pilar had opinions about most things, and generally expressed them in real time. And the fact that she listened to the entire account without speaking meant that she understood this was the kind of thing that required the full account before the opinions were useful. When Camille finished, Pilar was quiet for a moment. "He told you about his nephew," she said. "Yes." "Before or after he told you about the options?" "Before." Pilar looked at her hands. "A man who leads with his nephew is telling you something about who he is." "He might also be calculating," Camille said, because she had thought about this too. "He might," Pilar agreed. "But a man who calculates using a dead sister's child has a certain set of values that's hard to fake. Values have a logic. The logic either holds up or it doesn't." She paused. Has his logic held up so far? Camille thought about everything that had happened since 9/11 the previous evening. "Yes," she said. "Then let it keep holding up," Pilar said, "and watch for where it stops." Camille sat in the quiet of Pilar's living room with the rain on the window and the sleeping city below, and she thought about that. About the logic of a person. About how you learn the shape of someone, not in what they say, but in the architecture of their decisions, in the pattern of where they put their attention, in what they name when they explain themselves. In 8 words and an alley. In bread in the second cabinet. "I wanted to know when it was safe for you to move." Her phone buzzed one last time before she went to bed. The 11-digit number. No message, just a photo. A child, 6 years old, dark-haired, abiding at a kitchen table with a drawing in front of him. The drawing appeared to be a dog, or possibly a horse. It was, in large part, purple. Below it, one line. He found the purple marker. She looked at the photo for a long time. Then she typed back, "Tell him my daughter approves of his taste." She went to bed in the small room next to Rose's, and the rain came down outside, and the city went about its business below, and somewhere in it, in an apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and east-facing light, and a book open on the arm of an armchair, a man she had texted by accident was, she understood this only gradually, in the way understanding comes when you're not looking directly at it, already making decisions that had her name in them. She would find out the shape of those decisions soon enough. For now, she closed her eyes, and for the second night in a row, she slept without listening for footsteps in the hall. Wednesday arrived cold and specific, the way January mornings do when they have decided to mean business, and Camille stood outside her apartment building at 9:10 with Vincent beside her, and a set of keys she wasn't sure she wanted to use anymore, and looked at the door she had walked through every day for 2 years. The building was ordinary. Red brick, a 3rd floor. The buzzer for Unit 3C, still slightly sticky from where someone had spilled something on the panel 6 months ago, and maintenance had cleaned it, but not entirely. She had lived here for 4 years before Marcus. She had brought Rosa home from the hospital to this address. I had walked these stairs with the particular exhaustion of a woman carrying a newborn, and understanding for the first time that the life she was responsible for was no longer only her own. She had liked this building once. She had felt in it the specific, modest satisfaction of a person who has made a decent life from available materials. The last 2 years had done something to that satisfaction. It had not destroyed it exactly. It had simply buried it under enough other things that she could no longer find it without digging. "Take whatever you need," Vincent said from beside her. He said it the same way he said everything, without inflection, without urgency, stating the parameters of the situation. "We have time," She used her keys. The apartment was as she had left it, or nearly. There were 2 glasses on the counter that had not been there Tuesday night, and the kitchen chair nearest the window had been moved slightly, and these small evidences of Marcus having been here in the hours since she left felt like a particular kind of intrusion, the kind that doesn't require presence to be felt. She moved through the apartment quickly, with the efficiency of someone who has been thinking about this moment for 3 months and knows exactly where everything is. Rosa's things first. The stuffed animals in the order of importance Rosa had established through a complex and evolving taxonomy that only Rosa fully understood. The drawings from the refrigerator door, the small pair of rain boots by the front entrance, yellow with frogs on them, which Rosa had selected herself at the store with the seriousness of someone making an architectural decision. Then her own things, clothes, documents, the photograph of her mother that she kept on the nightstand and that she had almost left behind in her departure Tuesday night, which she understood now would have been the loss she'd have felt longest. She was in the bedroom, folding the last of what she needed, when she found it. It was on her pillow, an envelope, unsealed, with her name on the front in Marcus's handwriting. She looked at it for a moment. Then she put it in her bag without opening it, because she understood instinctively that whatever was inside it was designed to produce a specific response in her, the apology or the threat, or the combination of both that he had always been skilled at deploying. And she did not want to be in this apartment when she felt that response, whatever it was. She would read it later. She told herself she would read it later. She did not read it later. She read it in the car, with Vincent driving and the apartment building disappearing in the rear view, because the envelope had a quality of being inside her bag that she found she could not sustain for long. She opened it. It was neither apology nor threat. It was a single sentence. You know what I can do to people who think they can walk away from me, and you know I can do it quietly. She read it twice. Then she took a photograph of it and sent it to the 11-digit number and typed, "He left this on my pillow." The response came in 40 seconds. "I have it. No, don't go back to that building." Then, "Are you with Vincent?" "Yes." "Tell him to bring you here." She had not expected to return to the apartment on the 14th floor so soon, and certainly not in the circumstances of Marcus's sentence on her pillow. But here she was again in the elevator with its clean smell, arriving at the door with its good lock and its east-facing windows, and the coffee smell that she was already, in some unexamined way, beginning to associate with safety. Nico was at the desk in the study when Vincent brought her in. He was on the phone, and he held up one finger. Not dismissively. She understood the distinction, simply one moment, and finished the call in 30 seconds in a language she didn't speak, rapid and low, and hung up. He looked at her. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine. He wasn't there." "I know he wasn't there. He stood." That sentence is not the first move. It's the second. It means he's already made the first one and wants you to know it. The cold that had been in her hand since she found the envelope extended slightly up her arms. What does that mean? It means he's contacted someone. Nico was already moving to the other desk, the one with the multiple screens that she'd noticed during her first visit and had not asked about. He manages money for people who have resources he can call on when he needs a problem managed. He's done this before, with people who've tried to leave situations he created. He said this with the flat precision of someone delivering a briefing, not an accusation, just information that was now necessary. Well, I've spent the last 24 hours finding out exactly who he's contacted and what he's asked for. She watched him pull something up on the screen. What did he ask for? Nico turned to look at her. He did it with the same quality of directness that she had come to understand, was simply the way he engaged with difficult information, looking at it fully, not managing its impact. He asked for someone to locate Rosa. The room went very quiet. It was not actually quiet. The city was outside, and the building had its sounds, and the screens in front of Nico made their small electronic noises. But the inside of Camille became completely still in the way that happens when you receive information that reorganizes everything around it. "My daughter," she said. Her voice came out level. She was surprised by this. "He knew Rosa was at your aunt's building. He made inquiries. The person he contacted has been watching the building since yesterday evening." Nico said this without pause, without softening, because she had asked, and she deserved the complete information. "He hasn't done anything. He's been watching. Marcus wanted her located, not—" He stopped. He wanted leverage. That's what this is. Camille stood still for a moment. Then she picked up her phone and called Pilar. "Take Rosa somewhere else," she said, when Pilar picked up. "Right now. The 2 men in the lobby will go with you. Don't tell me where you're going. Just go." She paused. "Pack enough for a few days," Pilar said. "Already moving," and hung up. Camille put the phone down on the desk. She looked at Nico. "End this," she said. Her voice was absolutely level. It was the voice she had discovered in herself that she did not know she had. Not the voice she used when she was managing a situation. Not the voice she used when she was afraid. But the one below those. "Whatever it takes. I'm not asking you what it involves, or how. I'm asking you to end it." Something moved in Nico's face. She would look back at this moment later and understand that this was the moment things shifted. Not the wrong number text, not the alley, not the coffee shop, or the purple marker, or any of the accumulation of smaller moments. This one. The moment she had looked at him and said, "End it," with the absolute certainty of a woman who has located, at last, the bottom of her capacity for endurance and found something hard there. "I already started," he said. She did not know, in detail, what happened in the hours that followed. She knew that Nico made phone calls, and that Vincent drove somewhere, and that 2 other men she didn't know the names of did several things, whose nature she understood only in outline. She knew that Marcus Vitale arrived at his office that morning expecting an ordinary Wednesday, and found instead that 3 of his most significant clients had simultaneously terminated their management agreements, and that his accounts had been frozen, pending an investigation that had been initiated by an anonymous filing to the Financial Regulatory Authority. A filing that contained documentation so specific and so thoroughly organized that the person who had assembled it had clearly been building it for longer than 24 hours. She knew that the man Marcus had contacted to watch Pilar's building was met, before noon, by people who communicated to him with complete clarity that his involvement in the situation was now concluded, and that any further involvement would produce consequences he would find instructive. She knew, because Nico told her plainly, that Marcus would not be going to prison immediately. These things moved at institutional speeds, but he would be spending the foreseeable future in a narrowing corridor of legal and financial pressure that would leave him with no time, no resources, and no remaining connections willing to do him favors. The investigation would take the shape investigations take. In the meantime, while he had been made to understand, through channels that were not police, and not court, and not any system Marcus had experience navigating, that Camille and Rosa were outside the boundaries of anything he was permitted to attempt. "He'll understand it," Nico said when he told her this. "He's smart enough to understand when a situation has parameters he can't work around. This is that situation." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." She sat with this for a moment. And the man who was watching the building. Gone. Will he come back? No. She looked at Nico across the desk. She thought about what it cost, what he had spent in the last 24 hours, in whatever currency the world he operated in ran on, in favors and leverage, and the particular expenditure of making things happen that do not happen through ordinary channels. She thought about the fact that he had started before she asked him to, that before she had said, "End it," he had already been ending it, quietly, without announcement, because she had sent him a photograph of a sentence on her pillow, and he had understood, before she did, what it meant. "Matteo," she said, "you told me his mother left his father and made it out and then didn't." Nico looked at her steadily. "You said you couldn't save her," Camille said. "But this, what you did today, this is what saving looks like. When you do it before it's too late." He was quiet for a long moment, the kind of quiet that has something in it. "My sister ran with nothing," he said. "No one knew. No one had been paying attention. By the time I understood what was happening, she'd already been gone long enough that there was nothing to be done." He stopped. Started again. "I paid attention this time, from the moment I read your message." She understood this. She understood the shape of it, the old failure in forming the new decision, the way certain losses change the algebra of everything that comes after them. She had her own version of this. Though smaller, everyone did if they were paying attention. "I need to call Rosa," she said. "Of course." He stood. "I'll give you the room." "You don't have to." "I know," he said, and walked out. She called Pilar's new number, the one Pilar had texted from the undisclosed location, and heard Rosa's voice come through the phone with the particular brightness of a child who has been told they're on an adventure and has decided to believe it fully and without reservation. "Mama, we're at a place with a pool," Rosa announced. "A pool," Camille said. "No, January. It's inside. Aunt Pilar says I can put my feet in." "That sounds perfect. When are you coming?" "Soon," Camille said. "Very soon. I just need to finish something first." "What are you finishing?" She thought about how to answer this honestly to a 4-year-old. "I'm finishing making sure that our new life is ready for us," she said. Rosa considered this. "Is it going to have purple in it?" "Absolutely," Camille said. "As much purple as you want." "Good," Rosa said, with the satisfaction of someone whose core requirements have been confirmed. "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, baby. I love you so much." She sat for a moment after she hung up, holding the phone, looking at the east-facing windows and the January afternoon beyond them. Then she went to find Nico. He was in the kitchen. This surprised her. He was making coffee with the focused, unhurried attention he brought to everything, and there was a child at the kitchen table. She stopped in the doorway. The child was 6, or appeared to be, dark-haired, with Nico's jaw in miniature and eyes that were currently fixed on a drawing he was working on with a purple marker, his tongue protruding slightly from the corner of his mouth in the universal expression of someone concentrating on something important. The drawing appeared to involve some kind of vehicle, or possibly an animal. It was, as promised, primarily purple. Matteo looked up when she came into the doorway. He looked at her with the frank, unfiltered assessment of a child who has not yet learned to disguise his curiosity as something more socially acceptable. He looked at her jaw. He looked at her face. He looked back at his drawing. "You have an OE," he said. "I do," she said. "Does it hurt?" "A little." He considered this. "Uncle Nico says that when things hurt, you should say so, because pretending they don't doesn't make them not hurt." She looked at Nico, who had his back to the room and was not visibly reacting to this, though she suspected he was aware of every word. "Your uncle is right," she said. Matteo nodded, satisfied. "I'm Matteo," he said. "I'm Camille." "I know," he said. "Uncle Nico said you were coming. He said you were someone we should be kind to." "Did he?" "He says that about everyone," Matteo said, with the mild world-weariness of a child who has heard this instruction many times and found it occasionally inconvenient. But he said it like he especially meant it this time. She looked at the drawing. "Well, what are you making?" "A dog," Matteo said. "But it might be a horse. I haven't decided yet." "What's making it hard to decide?" He considered this seriously. "The legs," he said. "Dogs and horses have different legs, but I can't remember which is which." "Dogs have shorter legs," she said. "Usually." He looked at his drawing. He looked at her. He picked up the marker and made the legs shorter. "Dog," he decided. She sat down at the table across from him and watched him work, and Nico brought her a coffee and set it in front of her, and then sat at the end of the table with his own, and opened his phone to something, and gave her and Matteo the particular gift of his contained, unhurried presence. There, but not intrusive, in the room, but not demanding the room's attention. "My daughter has a theory about purple," Camille said to Matteo. He looked up immediately. "What theory?" "That it's the only color worth using for anything important." He stared at her. He looked down at his purple dog. He looked back at her with an expression of profound vindication. "I've been saying this," he said. "Nobody listens." "She's 4, Camille said. "Her name is Rosa. She has a stuffed elephant and a lot of opinions." "What kind of opinions?" "About purple, mostly. Also about which way a butterfly can fly, and whether submarines can be friends with cats." Matteo considered this. "Submarines can definitely be friends with cats," he said. "I don't see why not." "That's what she says." "She's smart," Matteo said, and returned to his drawing with the air of someone who has just confirmed a hypothesis. And Camille picked up her coffee and caught Nico's eye across the table. He was looking at her with that expression she kept trying to name, the one she'd first caught in the alley and had been returning to at intervals since. She named it now. It was the expression of someone who was watching something they hadn't dared hope for arrive. The days that followed arranged themselves in a shape she hadn't planned. Pilar and Rosa came back from their adventure with the indoor pool 2 days later. The legal process around Marcus moved in the way legal processes move, slowly, with the grinding inevitability of something that has been given both the evidence and the institutional pressure it needs to proceed. She filed her own report, formally with documentation. The fracture? The concussion? 3 months of careful notes she had been keeping in an app on her phone, on not knowing if she'd ever use them and keeping them anyway. The process would be long. She had a lawyer now, which was a new development, a woman named Sarah, who had the methodical intensity of someone who enjoys taking apart structures that should not have been built. She went back to the pharmacy. She worked her shifts. She collected Rosa from Pilar's in the mornings after, and they walked home through the January cold. Rosa in the yellow frog boots, narrating the status of every pigeon they passed, with the authority of someone who has formed strong opinions about pigeons, specifically. She did not move back to the apartment on Carmine and 5th. She did not move into the 14th floor either. She found a place of her own, a 2-bedroom in the quieter part of the east side, smaller than what she was used to but hers, and with windows that faced a small park where Rosa could see the trees and Camille could see the park bench below and feel, for the first time in a very long time, that she was living in a space whose dimensions were set by her own preferences and nobody else's. Nico helped her move. He arrived with Vincent and 2 other men, and did not comment on the modesty of the apartment or the distance from his building or any of the choices she had made, because she was coming to understand that this was a consistent quality of him. The absence of judgment about the specific shape of what she decided. He moved boxes with the particular economy of motion of someone who has long since stopped needing to demonstrate anything through physical effort. And when they were done, he stood in the center of her new living room and looked around at the modest, particular space she had chosen and said, "It's good," with a simplicity that she understood as genuine. She walked him to the door. They stood in the doorway of her new apartment, the one that was hers for a moment. "Thank you," she said, "for all of it, from the alley forward." "You don't have to. I know I don't have to," she said. "That's the point. I'm choosing to say it." She looked at him. "You told me in the coffee shop that you don't do things for single reasons. I want you to know that I don't feel things for single reasons either. I'm grateful. And I also think you are someone worth knowing. And those are 2 separate things." He looked at her. "Matteo has been asking about Rosa," he said, 3 times today. "Rosa has been asking about the dog drawing," she said. "She wants to know if it has a name." "He named it Tuesday," Nico said, "because that's when he finished it." "That's a very sensible name for a dog," Camille said. He thought so. She was quiet for a moment. He was quiet too, with that quality of stillness that she had stopped finding unnerving sometime in the last several days, and had started finding something closer to the word restful, which she would not have predicted. "Saturday," she said. "Rosa asks to go to the park every Saturday, the one by the East Side Library with the fountain." She paused. "If Matteo wanted to come. If you both wanted to come." Nico looked at her for a long moment. The look she could now name, the one that arrived when something he had been careful not to hope for came forward and presented itself. "Saturday," he said. 11 o'clock, she said. "Dress him warm. Rosa's theory is that if you're wearing enough layers, you can stay outside as long as you want, and she will lobby hard for this position." "Matteo has the same theory," Nico said. "Then they'll get along fine," she said. He left. She closed the door of her apartment. Her apartment, the one that was hers, the one with the park below the window and the 2 bedrooms and the dimensions of her own preferences. And she stood in her own hall for a moment and listened to the new and specific silence of a space that had never held anything she needed to be afraid of. Rosa appeared from the bedroom. She had been overseeing the arrangement of her stuffed animals, which was an organizational challenge she took extremely seriously. "Who was that?" she said. "A friend," Camille said. "The one you've been texting?" She looked at her daughter, 4 years old, and already paying attention to everything. Yes, she said. He has a nephew named Matteo. Matteo draws dogs in purple. You're going to meet him on Saturday. Rosa considered this with the seriousness it deserved. Does the dog have a name? Tuesday, Camille said. Rosa thought about this. That's a good name, she said, with the authority of someone who has named several stuffed animals and knows what she's talking about. And then she went back to the bedroom to continue the organizational challenge. Oh, and Camille stood in her hallway and felt the apartment settle around her, the particular quality of a place you are in the process of making yours. And she thought about Saturday with the particular quality of thought that is not planning, but something closer to anticipation. Saturday was bright and cold, and the park was full of the particular population of January parks. People walking dogs with the purposeful speed of people who are also cold. Children who have been told they can only be outside for a limited time and are making the absolute most of it. One elderly man on the fountain bench who appeared to have the same relationship to cold that Rosa had, which was one of total indifference. Camille arrived at 11 with Rosa in the yellow frog boots and her purple coat and the stuffed elephant, which had been deemed by Rosa a necessary component of any park excursion. Nico was already there. He was standing near the fountain with his hands in his coat pockets and a child beside him in a red hat and an expression of tremendous alertness. Matteo, surveying the park with the intensity of someone mapping territory. He spotted Rosa at approximately the same moment Rosa spotted him, and there was a brief and mutual assessment that lasted perhaps 3 seconds. And then Rosa said, "Is that Matteo?" And Camille said, "Yes." And Rosa walked directly over to him with the confidence of someone who has already decided this is going to work out. Camille walked to Nico. He was watching the children. Matteo had apparently immediately asked to see the elephant. Rosa was explaining the elephant's name, Gerald, with the seriousness of someone giving a formal introduction. Matteo was listening with his head slightly tilted, the gesture that Camille had already in 2 meetings identified as his expression of genuine attention. "She named the elephant Gerald," Nico said. "She did. She said he looked like a Gerald." "Matteo named a rock at school Federico," Nico said, and then was very upset when someone moved it. A rock. He had a strong connection to it. Rosa once refused to leave a parking lot because she wanted to say goodbye to a specific shopping cart, Camille said. Nico looked at her. The corner of his mouth moved. They stood together by the fountain and watched the children negotiate the terms of whatever they were playing, which appeared to involve Gerald the elephant, and a game whose rules Rosa was explaining with great authority, and Matteo was accepting with complete seriousness. And the park moved around them in its ordinary January way, indifferent and alive. "How are you?" Nico said. Not the polite version of the question, the actual one. She thought about it honestly. "Better than I expected to be," she said. "There are still days where I hear a door close, and my whole body does something before I can stop it. There are nights where I go over the exit routes in my head, even though I'm in an apartment where there's nothing to exit from." She paused. "But the days are getting longer. And I'm starting to be able to tell the difference between a door closing and a threat, which sounds like a small thing." "It's not a small thing," he said. "No," she agreed. "It isn't." They were quiet for a moment. Rosa had gotten Matteo to run around the fountain, following a logic that Camille couldn't hear from here, but that Matteo was committed to. He ran with the uninhibited full-body investment of a 6-year-old. his red hat slightly askew, his face bright from the cold. And she thought about what Nico had said about him asking too many questions and having opinions about things that didn't require opinions. And she could see it, could see the shape of the person he was building himself into. And it was a good shape. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes." "What you did, with Marcus, with the investigation, with all of it." She chose her words carefully. "It was not. It's not something that happens through ordinary channels." "No," he said. "It isn't. I've thought about what that means, about what it means to have accepted that help." He turned to look at her. And I've decided," she said, "that the world I was living in before was also not operating through ordinary channels. It just used different ones. Marcus used the channels of someone who is good at controlling what other people see and believe and fear. You use the channels of someone who has built up the kind of power that operates on a different register entirely." She looked at him. "I'm not saying those are the same thing. I'm saying I've stopped expecting that the world runs on the rules it claims to run on. And I've stopped thinking that my safety is required to come from pure and uncomplicated sources." Nico was quiet for a moment. "I'm going to keep doing things," he said, "that operate outside what most people would call ordinary channels. I'm not going to become something different than what I am." "I know," she said. "And that might—" "I know," she said again. "I'm not asking you to be different. I'm telling you that I'm paying attention to who you actually are, not who the simple version of the story would require you to be." She paused. "The logic has held up so far." He looked at her for a long moment. Then, "Who told you to watch for where it stops?" "My aunt." He nodded. "She's right. She usually is," Camille said. "It's somewhat exhausting." The corner of his mouth moved. This time she decided it fully counted as a smile. Across the fountain, Rosa was showing Matteo something. Gerald held up for inspection. The elephant examined with Matteo's characteristic seriousness. He took Gerald carefully, turned him over once, handed him back with a nod that seemed to convey approval. Rosa looked satisfied. Matteo said something. Rosa said something back, and they both sat down on the edge of the fountain in the January cold, with the complete indifference to temperature of people who have more interesting things to think about. Camille thought about 8 words typed with shaking hands on a cracked phone screen in a pharmacy restroom. She thought about the particular randomness of the wrong digit, how one number off in 11 had split the night into a before and an after. She thought about all the ways it could have gone differently, all the versions where she had simply gotten a confused stranger who didn't reply or replied with wrong number and gone back to bed. And she had spent some of the long nights in her new apartment thinking about those versions with a kind of retrospective vertigo. But she had not gotten a confused stranger. She had gotten a man who received 8 words in the middle of the night and was in an alley 8 minutes later with a car and a doctor on call, and the particular quality of attention that told you, without being told, that for the duration of that night, you were someone's first priority. She thought about what it meant that she had needed to reach that point: the broken jaw, the pharmacy bathroom, the shaking hands, to find a door that had been available to her all along, if she had known where to look or how to ask. She was learning how to ask. "My aunt is coming for dinner next week," she said. "She wants to meet you." Nico looked at her. "She'll ask you direct questions," Camille said. "She won't be unkind about it, but she'll be honest. I prefer honesty," I know, she said. That's why I told her yes. He was quiet for a moment. Then, what did you tell her about me? That the logic has held up, she said. And that Matteo named a rock Federico and was very upset when someone moved it. Nico looked out at the park. That was a very important rock. What made it important? He thought about this. He said it was the right size, he said. That it fit exactly in his hand. He said not everything that fits in your hand is important, but the things that are important usually fit exactly. She stood still for a moment. She thought about the size of 8 words, the size of an alley, the size of bread in the second cabinet, and chamomile tea at the right temperature, and a note on a table that said, "It isn't a negotiation." She thought about the size of this park on a January Saturday, and the 2 children at the fountain, whose logic was becoming, already, its own small fact in the world. He's not wrong, she said. He usually isn't, Nico said, when he's not wrong about the legs of dogs. Dogs have shorter legs, she said. He knows that now, Nico said. He asked me to confirm it when he got home. He made a note. She looked at him. He looked at her. The park went on around them, the city beyond it. The whole vast ordinary machine of a world that did not pause for anyone's specific private miracle. It had not paused for her broken jaw, or her 3 months of careful planning, or any of the accumulated damage of 27 months. It had not paused for the right number or the wrong one. But she was still in it. She had always been still in it. And now, standing in the January cold beside a man she had texted by accident, and a fountain where their children were telling each other important things about stuffed elephants and naming conventions, she felt, not the absence of fear, which she understood was not something that resolves all at once, but something running beneath it, something that fear had been sitting on top of for a very long time. She felt, specifically and quietly, like herself. This is where the story lives now, not in the broken jaw or the bathroom floor, not in the alley or the 8 minutes or any of the desperate mechanics of a night that could have gone differently 100 ways. It lives in the Wednesday and the Saturday and the dinner next week that Pilar is already preparing for, as though it is the most important meal of the year, which for Pilar any meal worth cooking is. It lives in a purple marker and a dog named Tuesday, and a 6-year-old who makes notes when he learns something true about the world. It lives in a 4-year-old in yellow boots who has decided, with her characteristic authority, that Matteo's theory about purple is correct and has told him so, and who takes this alliance very seriously. It lives in the particular quality of a door you can open yourself. She sent 8 words to the wrong number, and the wrong number turned out to be the right one, because she had the misfortune of a cracked phone screen and a broken jaw, and the extraordinary luck of a man who saw jaw and home and please and came in 8 minutes and has not, in all the time since, made her regret that he did. He is dangerous. She knows this. She has always known this. The world he operates in has edges that the ordinary world doesn't. And she looks at those edges with the clear eyes of someone who has decided that clarity is the only honest option. And she watches the logic. And the logic holds. There are still nights where the door sounds wrong. There are still moments where her whole body remembers things her mind is working to unlearn. There will be more of those moments, and she will move through them the way she has moved through every difficult thing. Not quickly, not easily, but forward. But there are also Saturday mornings in the park. There is also tea at the right temperature, there is also a man at the end of a table watching his nephew and her daughter negotiate the complex diplomacy of being 6 and 4, and both certain they are right about everything important. And the look on his face that she can now name without effort, because she sees it every time the door opens and she and Rosa come in. And it is the look of someone for whom the room has been waiting to be full. She did not plan this. She planned Friday. She planned quiet. She planned a clean departure and a fresh start, and the modest satisfaction of a life rebuilt from careful preparation. She planned everything except the wrong number and the 8 minutes, and what comes after you stop running. This is what comes after. This, all of it, is what comes after. Thank you so much for staying until the end. If this story stayed with you, the videos on your screen right now were made for you. I think you'll love them. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.